Remember my rusty silver EVO? Well, its part out time has come. So we're literally going to start taking it apart, and in some cases the rust makes it easier to just rip it apart. So in case you didn't remember how rusty this thing is, let's take a tour. This is actually after I ripped almost everything out, but look at those chassis legs. Have you seen something so rusty? Can you believe this car was being raced only 3 months prior to this? It's crazy. Hopefully your EVO looks 100% better than this and you have more confidence in yours, because this one is just rusted out pretty bad. But since everything is removed, or a lot of stuff is removed, I can give you some better shots at how rusty everything was in here. If you watched my JDM fuel tank install video, you probably saw some of these shots too, but I know not everyone watches my how-to videos. But man, you can see how rusty it was up in here where the fuel tank was, kind of even hiding some of that part of where it was rusty. Up front, also pretty bad, but not quite as bad as the rear. The rear was my main concern. Of course, that front subframe, that front K-member was replaced brand new only a couple years ago under warranty, thankfully, so that was good. The radiator supports pretty much getting rusted holes in them as well. So let's go back to how these days of working on the car all got started. It was a fabulous 0 degrees out here in Wisconsin, so it was super cold, and I tried to start it up, and it would not start. The battery had just enough cranking amps to kind of crank it over, but it wouldn't crank it over fast enough to start. So I had to jump it, and eventually I got to start and drive it into the garage. And this is the last time this car will ever drive under its own power. It's a little bit sad, but you know, the amount of mileage I got out of this car when I got it is actually pretty surprising, and especially considering it did so many races, and honestly, it never lost a race for me, so that's pretty awesome too. So we're going to start parting this thing out. I had a couple days to utilize this hoist, so I had to kind of get things done in a timely manner because I needed to get it in and out in just basically a day or two. So I started, of course, by taking off some things under the hood. So we got the strut part off and out of the way. But what's nice is you can just take your strut bar off and then just put the nuts back on the struts, and that'll hold your struts back in. So I did that. And then throughout this whole process of starting to kind of part things out, one of the biggest pains was this rear motor mount. I don't know how much I've talked about this rear motor mount in the past, other than my transmission removal and install videos, but man, this thing was a huge pain. Again, kind of because of rust. And I did actually show this motor mount initially, like early on before I took things out, just because the power steering line that's underneath this motor mount is actually what broke on this car, and part of the reason I parked the car a little bit early, and because it's just really hard to access that area to fix that power steering line. It's crazy. Here I'm cutting ahead again to where the T-case was removed, and even with the T-case out and a lot of stuff removed, I still can't hardly see that power steering line back there, the shorter one. It's just such a stupid thing to fix. And again, with that motor mount being a pain in the butt, I got this part of the motor mount out with that bolt seized in place, and that's just how much of a pain in the butt it was, you know, to get that out. So I'm ripping off this HKS exhaust. It served me pretty well. It's nice and quiet for the street, but I do think I might switch to a Busher exhaust for the red car when I start swapping things over. Not 100% sure yet. Maybe I'll run this exhaust on it for a little while since I still have it. But we'll see what parts make their way over and how soon I get this other EVO shell rolling again. And if you don't remember, I had the STM O2 eliminator downpipe on this car, which had worked out really good. So it seems like a nice piece, holding up pretty well. So I think that's going to transfer over to the next car, but we're going to remove that, of course, to get it out of the way as well. Now on to removing this front cross member, front center member. I'm going to drop this down as well. This is, of course, where one of the other motor mounts is in place. There's 4 main motor and transmission mounts holding everything in place. This is one of the easiest ones to access, but we're going to just take this whole bar out and out of the way. And now that all that is out of the way, the drive shaft's going to start getting pulled out. I know I could have separated this into more pieces, I believe, but I took it out as just one whole big assembly, because why not? I got these exhaust stands here that I could utilize. Makes it actually really nice to kind of drop this down. So we're pulling out this old drive shaft. I'll probably just store this away. I don't know what I'm going to do with this drive shaft, but it'll be good to have a backup, spare, just in case. but the drive shaft that came with that other red car shell seemed a lot better than this one. Honestly, I was pretty much removing stuff kind of randomly. You can see the downpipe's back in place now, but it made more sense for me to just explain removing all the front intercooler piping and the front bumper kind of in the same section of the video. So through the magic of editing, I'm going to do that instead. So of course I took off the lower intercooler pipe, took off the front bumper, gives us easier access to the upper intercooler pipe portion here that goes to our front mount intercooler, took that pipe off, and went ahead and removed our OEM front mount intercooler as well. The red shell I bought did come with a pretty nice aftermarket intercooler, so we got that all set too. So we're going to throw that aftermarket intercooler on to the red car. And this OEM one gets added to my collection of about three or four other OEM intercoolers I have sitting in my basement. That's normal, right? So I removed all the bolts, of course, holding the T-case in and their CV shafts. I did a lot of suspension work, honestly, that you're not going to see in this video because I swapped suspension over from the red car, and that car was outside, and again, it was cold, so I didn't film anything with swapping the suspension over, but just letting you know I did all that stuff too. And here I am struggling with the T-case going, well, what is wrong with this thing? If only someone made a how-to video on this where I could see what the heck I was doing and what I did wrong. Oh, that's right. That's me. I should have looked at my own video or just remembered that the intermediate shaft has to come out. So yeah, I had to, of course, remove the intermediate shaft before you can remove your T-case. So just a reminder on that, guys. Take that intermediate shaft out. Then you can get your transfer case out the rest of the way. And also, again, removing the transfer case, you need to kind of have probably both those the front and rear motor mounts out. I do have that rear motor mount out of place already at this point. You need to be able to rock the engine forward a bit to be able to slide that transfer case between the engine and that lower front cross member. So I did have it down to only 2 motor mounts holding the engine up at this point, and as you saw, I used a pry bar to just rock the whole engine and transmission forward as I used another one of those stands to help me guide that transfer case down and drop it out of the way. But again, I love that I had access to the hoist. Doing this on the ground is awful. So if you're laying on your back doing a transfer case job on your EVO, man, I give you respect. It's a pain in the butt. So that was enough for one day. The next day I came back bright and early, started working on the car right away again. And now we got to get a radiator out. So I'm draining the fluid, of course. And then I'm going to start pulling out this OEM radiator. I'd really love to upgrade it on the red car, get a better radiator, probably one where I don't have to run the radiator hose like that, where you can just run the hose a bit straight through. So, you know, hitting up people to try and get some parts and help me get some parts on that. But I always like to source my viewers too. What do you guys have for radiator in your EVO, and have you had any luck with it? What do you have? What do you like? Let me know in the comment section. It's always nice too when you pop out that radiator, man. It just seems like you got so much more room in the car to work with stuff. So it's good to get that out and made everything else a little easier to access and look at. So now you can see what everything looks like here on the front. Of course, I've been disconnecting wires. You can see I disconnected the harness going down to the starter. T-case is out. Again, what's funny about back here is you can't even see that line I thought I was going to fix. I honestly thought I was going to maybe fix that power steering line on this one, and eventually I was like, I'm not even going to bother. Even with the engine out, I'm like, man, I don't even want to screw with this. Oil cooler is just hanging on by a little bit, so we're going to remove that in a second. But again, cutting ahead through the magic of editing, as I talk about that power steering line, I mean, this is how buried that stuff is. You just would really need to drop the whole front member, center member, K member to kind of get to it. It's just a pain. But here's the setup as I'm almost ready to drop things out. You can see, of course, I just disconnected all the wires, disconnected the fuel lines, disconnected the heater core lines, all that stuff. And you can see I got this good old Harbor Freight cart here that I can use to move the engine around because it's probably going to be sitting out of the car for a while and I got to be able to move it. I did grab some blocks. I probably didn't need to necessarily, but I didn't want to risk a lot of weight on the engine oil pan for too long. So I got some blocks of wood that you can see here to put on the edges of the oil pan so it's not sitting right on the bottom of the oil pan. And then I put some other pieces of wood underneath the trans just so it was still a bit level. And then it was a slow and steady process, but of course I love having access to a hoist. So I was just lifting up the car from the engine and pretty much just kept moving the engine a bit forward a little bit every time. I lift it up, pull it forward, lift it up, pull it forward. If I was doing this over again too, I probably would have just removed the power steering pump altogether because that was a really tight fit. When I go to install this in the red car, I'm pretty sure I'm just going to remove that power steering pump. In this case, I just disconnected the line, which normally I wouldn't do because I wouldn't want to lose all the fluid. But in this case, the fluid is already gone because, like I said, I blew that power steering line anyway. But next time, I'll just pull that whole power steering pump off. But there we go. Once we got the engine kind of all out of the way from everything, we knew we could just start lifting up the car all the way, and it was good to go. I was a little worried that the engine might want to rock a bit on this table, but it did seem pretty sturdy. I did kind of test it myself a little bit, make sure it wouldn't, tip over on its own, and I still ended up putting a strap on it just to strap it down, just to make sure as it sits that I don't want it to just fall off the table or anything. But the hydraulic table should be nice to raise up the engine to as needed later, but now I can also just roll it around and get it out of the way. So here's what everything looks like, dropping the engine and trans kind of all as one piece here. You can see that one part of the motor mount is still on there, that rear part stuck on. That one bolt was really stuck on there too. It's crazy that those bolts would be so tight because we just put this stuff in there not too long ago. Although maybe that bolt was never actually removed, I don't know. Don't remember. But that was it. The engine's out. Now we're going to move to do some work on the rear of the car, popping off that rear bumper right away. Then we're going to drop down our rear differential. We're going to take that out. That, of course, I might as well just get it out of the car while I can. My main goal, again, was to not have to ever put this car up on the hoist anymore. So I kind of wanted to get everything that I wanted from underneath the car out. And then later I can just go, wherever the car's parked, I can just go get stuff from it, take stuff off of it as needed. But of course, having a spare rear diff would be good too. So I'm taking this rear differential out and dropping it out of the way. Popping the CV shafts out of the rear diff itself. These rear CV shafts, half shafts, whatever you want to call them, they were stuck in the wheel bearings. Like they're just welded in there. I mean, not actually welded, but they're just stuck in there so tight. I was hitting them with a maul and they would not come loose. So I'm glad I never had to change a rear axle on this thing because they're just seized up in there. So I also don't really need them for anything again. So I basically was just popping out the CV shafts from the rear diff itself, like I said, and I had the one lower trailing arm down, so that way I could really kind of push that whole hub assembly away, and that made it so I could just kind of pop the rear diff out from one side at a time. Again, I was working on suspension, swapping it over from the red car. So with the red car, it had some BC coilovers that the springs were broke on them. They're honestly pretty junky. So I just did a complete swap. I took the stock suspension that was on the silver car and put it over on the red car because stock suspension is actually not too bad other than, ride height, and it looks really high. But should be some decent suspension to start with on the red car. Better than these crappy coilovers that came on the red car initially. So fuel tank fun. Here we are kind of in this portion of the car looking towards the rear, as you can see, and we're going to start dropping down our fuel tank. Of course, I didn't show every little thing that as I was working on it here. I did already, disconnect the fuel pump housing hanger and all that stuff. And now it came time to just kind of removing those 4 nuts that hold the fuel tank in place and then just dropping it down. Once again, utilizing these awesome stands that I have. They're definitely pretty handy for every job I'm doing here when you're dropping heavy stuff down little bit by little bit. And again, this is a JDM tank. I made a whole video on installing it and all the stuff about it. That's different than the US market tank. For this car, it worked out fine. It doesn't have that fuel temp sensor spot that the US market tank does, so you're still going to have check engine light issues. But for the purpose of holding fuel and having your car run, it does work just fine. But of course, I'm going to keep that JDM tank around. Hopefully I won't need it. I think the tank on the silver car, I know it's a regular US tank, and I think it should be in good shape. But if that one ever rusts out, I got this backup if needed. So here it is on the ground. Look at that. I got some little visitors that were just building a home up there. Huh. That's cool. Now this rear bar here was, of course, you have to lower this because the pinch on the fuel tank is held up where this bar is. So you actually have to lower this bar down a little bit, which means I did that before. I kind of forgot I did. But this time it got even more seized in place after a couple years. And this side that's still in place, I had to use a chisel to get in there to get that to come down. It was a real pain in the butt. But I got it out of the way just enough. And I didn't even know my rear like bumper, the actual bumper itself, was kind of broken off. It was literally just broken off on the right side. So I was like, all right, I guess I'll just break it off on the driver's side right away too. So just kind of fun pulling it apart. Just so rusty. It's fun now to just pull rusty shit apart now that I don't care. But when I was like, I'm gonna drive this car tomorrow, it's kind of a little less fun to pull rusty crap off of it. And that was about it for parting most of it out. Here's what it looked like under the hood, you know, after I kind of removed everything on the silver car. You know, it still looks pretty busy under here, which, you know, it doesn't look super clean. But the good news is this is all stuff, you know, I have in case I need it. Because if we look under the red car here, you can see that the red car looks super clean, but that also means it's missing a whole bunch of stuff. So there's a lot of things I need to start transferring over from the silver car to the red car. I want to really get this kind of red car looking honestly kind of like the silver car did under the hood, of course, as far as having everything transferred over to just work in an engine bay when there's no engine. Should just make things a lot easier that way. So there you have it. Pour one out for the good old rusty silver EVO shell. It lived a good life, even with me, I think. You know, it was the source of a lot of good content, a lot of good how-to videos. I learned a lot. I got to play a lot. I got to learn driving a lot with it. I got to race it, spectator racing quite a few times, ice racing, spectator racing on dirt and pavement, so that was always fun. And I guess I can't say the car never lost a race, because technically it lost at ice racing, so dang it. But it never lost a spectator race. So there you have it, guys. That's about it for this video. As always, I really appreciate everybody watching. If you have, you know, suggestions for content you want to see as I build this red EVO, let me know. I honestly feel like I've covered a lot of stuff already, so I don't know if I'm going to do too much how-to type stuff, but I'll definitely try to film and do stuff similar to this, so hopefully you like this style, and I'll make some videos like this as I put it back together. But as always, this is Paul from Boosted Films, saying thanks so much for watching. I just want to say that domestic violence is never okay. If you or someone you know is experiencing issues with a partner and doesn't feel safe, please visit the website thehotline.org or call 1-800-799-SAFE.